about 4 in the morning, the bomb disposal people came in and they defused it. They had a cup of tea with us and they went over to Elm Park, and where another one had come down, and unfortunately they blew themselves, all of them were killed in that one. Which I mean, 5 minutes they were drinking tea with me, the next minute they weren't there. And you say you mourn, you don't mourn. You think tragedy, yes, but you can't mourn. It was another disaster, another thing that had happened, and you didn't talk about it. You just lit another cigarette and got on with it.
The Battle of Britain marked Hitler's first significant defeat in the Second World War, but victory came at a terrible cost. Over 500 RAF pilots were lost, and tens of thousands of civilians were killed or injured.
They always say you never hear the one that comes down, and I didn't. And it was pretty painful. I was going into ops and it blew me between the sandbags over the counter onto a wireless set and didn't half hurt, and I reported sick for the first time, the only time I reported sick. And the MO said, "Oh, I've got plenty of dead around here, just lean against the radiator for 48 hours and then you're back on duty." And what they didn't know was that I'd fractured my back. I am not special. I'm just a person. I was put in a situation that any of you could have done or would do to protect your freedom and your home. And you would have done the same. Any of you would have done the same.
Joy was working at Hornchurch on September the 8th, 1943, when her colleague, Flight Lieutenant Pat Lardner-Burke, climbed into his Spitfire on the first of his 3 flights that day. It was 08:45 hours, and MH434 was part of a larger wing that were acting as high cover for 72 Allied marauders as they headed for targets in Lille. They were attacked by 10 to 12 Focke-Wulf 190s, but the wing continued its escort. They lost one of their Spitfires, but Lardner-Burke got his plane home safely.
The excitement was enormous, enormous. And I mean, I always found that when I came back, although it might be cold, I was still sweating.
You've got to love it, because you went into combat daily with it together, you and that aeroplane. My Spitfire and me.
At 13:45, Lardner and his plane were back in the sky again, this time providing cover for 12 Venturas on their way to Abbeville. They flew over France at just 2,000 feet, climbing to a height of 22,000. Soon, they came across 12 Fokkers. It looked like they hadn't been spotted, and dived to attack.
He would have to be very sharp. This was all happening in short seconds with lots of your colleagues around you in formation, all joining together to do something.
You are worrying about the guys that you're flying with, the operation that you're on, whether you're going to do the right thing, whether you're going to make a mistake, whether you're going to come home with the same number of people.
Another 3 or 4 minutes and it had all disappeared and you're by yourself.
The Focke-Wulf 190s broke formation, and 222 Squadron only managed to hit one of the enemy aircraft. Lardner-Burke was back in Hornchurch just after 3 o'clock.
You watched the Spitfires being refueled, rearmed, bullet holes patched, everybody working like mad, and then the phone would go, and you think, God, this is a quick one. We've only been on the deck an hour and a half, 2 hours, and off you'd go again.
You would be exhausted, but you had a certain sort of feeling of unity with the others in your squadron.
They were an amazing bunch of guys. You should have met them.
Just before 6 in the evening, 222 Squadron spotted 12 Messerschmitt 109s. Lardner Burke and another 222 pilot opened fire, and black smoke was seen bellowing from the plane. Lardner Burke broke to the left, allowing the other pilot to fire for 14 seconds. The Messerschmitt ploughed into the ground at 500 miles an hour. From up here, Britain looks so peaceful. It's hard to believe that 70 years ago, we would have been flying through a battlefield. But there's still plenty of evidence of Britain's flying past, if you know where to look.
We can see Biggin Hill down there, can't we?
Yeah, indeed, John. The main runway you can see running across from left to right.
And that was such an important airfield during the Battle of Britain, wasn't it?
Absolutely.
Biggin Hill's closeness to London made it a prime target for the Luftwaffe. RAF squadrons based here claim to have destroyed more than 1,000 enemy aircraft, losing several hundred pilots in the process. Ground crew suffered too, with many people being killed in a dozen separate attacks spread over 6 months.
I suppose what's striking, always when you're up in the air watching the Spitfire pilots, you think how lonely they must have been, and how difficult it must have been controlling these small planes. All right, fighting for your country, but at extraordinary personal risk when you would know that many of your friends would have been killed on these missions. So coming home, as we are now, flying down, this must have been a terrific sense of relief that we are back on the ground, back on terra firma.
But sometimes it's easy to forget that for every Spitfire pilot in the air, there was always someone on the ground, anxiously waiting to see if they would come home. Flight Lieutenant Pat Lardner Burke's son, Martin, has found some letters from his mother that reveal the extraordinary demands made, not just on the pilots, but also on their families.
And we've actually only just unearthed these very recently, a couple of days ago. Credit to my mother here. I mean, she's a wonderful, wonderful hoarder. On Sunday afternoon, I went down to Hornchurch, Sundays being the day in which females are allowed onto the premises. Pat is expected to have the afternoon off, but when I arrived, he was away on an unexpected sweep, so the adjutant met me with the squadron car. Pat arrived back at about 4, and we then had tea and sat on the lawn. At 6 o'clock, they went off on another sweep. I managed to get down to the aerodrome and then watched all 26 Spitfires take off. It was a marvellous sight. And 26 Spitfires took off, and you know, she just sat on the lawn.
Yeah.
These guys would, you know, the wives and the girlfriends would just sit there and hope that 26 got counted back again. They were away for 1.5 hours, and then we watched them all come back again.
But they had to just wait.
Well, you imagine having a tea party and suddenly all the partners take off, and, you know, you just don't know if they're coming back, do you?
No. Do you feel you know him? Do you feel closer to him now, perhaps? Than you have
I
been for
actually
many
do,
years?
yes.
Yeah. And your feelings about him?
Well, still my father. We knew him when we were young. I mean, it's a bit tricky. That's not one I can really answer, because my feelings are for my father.
But pride?
Oh, there is pride, yes.
A lot of pride?
Yes.